Tell me a little bit about what it means to you in your market to appraise a property that's off the grid.
When you get into the Amish community, everything is do it yourself. So they'll build a house in 2 weeks.
I'm in shock. There's no working age, no unions. I'm just shocked.
Welcome back to Face Value, a podcast from the Appraisal Institute. I'm your co-host, Warren Boizot. Every appraiser knows that real estate is local, but some markets have properties so unique that they defy standard valuation methods. We aren't just talking about luxury features, but about entire market segments built with different construction methods, unique mechanical systems, and independent from the public utility grid.
For appraisers, these properties raise questions about market definition, functional utility, and competency. That's why today we're exploring how to value these unique homes. To help us, we've welcomed Beau Fox, who is a designated SRA appraiser with Johnson Realty and Appraiser Company and has extensive experience appraising properties with these off-grid characteristics.
Beau, thanks for joining us today. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
All right. My name is Beau Fox. I'm a certified residential appraiser here in Warren, Pennsylvania. I cover 2 states, Pennsylvania and New York. I'm going to be the vice president of the Northwestern PA chapter here at the Appraisal Institute here next year. I work for a small independent appraisal company here in Warren, and we cover residential and commercial appraisals. I have my SRA designation from the Appraisal Institute. I live here in Warren with my fiance, 14-year-old stepdaughter, and dog Leo.
But although your firm does residential and commercial, you just do residential, correct?
Yeah, I just have my residential license.
What are some of the common architectural and construction features that define the unique off-grid properties in your market?
We have a variety of properties here in Pennsylvania and New York. Our market is very, very rural, it's not big city life or anything like that. We have various properties. You could have 100 acres. You could also have a property that has 2, maybe 3 single family homes on the property, along with a bunch of outbuildings. We've appraised the geodesic domes.
Is that pretty common in your market, that particular style, geodesic dome?
So we have probably a handful of geodesic domes in our market, and I've only been able to appraise one of them. But, you go in there and you have to measure all the walls, and they're not all the same. So it's a unique situation there.
Plus, if it's anything like Colorado, all 5 to 6 of the ones you have in your market, they all sell once a year, right? So the comps are easy, piece of cake, right?
Yeah, that's the difficult part, because I don't think we didn't have any sales within the last probably handful of years. So
it's tough, though. I've always kind of dipping into that just a bit. I've kind of always learned and been told, unique is unique. A geodesic dome doesn't necessarily have to be compared to another geodesic dome, but it's something that a typical buyer that would buy that type of property would probably also be interested in other very unique types of properties, and therefore they're pretty good comps for one another.
So the big thing there is when you're finding the comparable sales, you have to expand your parameters a little bit. Look outside the radius of that specific municipality. You might have to expand it countywide. You might have to go into competing counties, and usually you can find something that's kind of similar, which is the best available, and that's what we have to utilize.
Tell me a little bit about what it means to you in your market to appraise a property that's off the grid.
We've appraised properties where there is strictly solar to use for the energy, or we do properties that there is no even electric hookups in the house. There's properties in our area that don't have septic systems. So septics aren't required. So municipality sewer is not available and septics are not required. So in those instances, there might be like a holding tank or an outhouse. And then there's properties that have 2 or 3 living quarters on it with, there could be 5 to 10 outbuildings on these properties, which limited utilities. So they are off the grid. Yeah.
Is that so different generations of a family can live on the same property? Is that kind of what you're seeing?
Yeah. So there are properties that it may start out as an original farmhouse on about 65 acres, for instance. And in that 65 acres, the first generation will sell the property to the next generation, and they'll build another living quarters on that property. And with that transaction is, hey, mom and pop get to stay here. That process kind of continues, and you might get 2 or 3 living quarters on the same piece of land. Yeah.
Now, this, you're talking like super rural Pennsylvania, right? That's where this is, where you're seeing this kind of thing.
Yeah. So it'd be so Northwest PA is where we would cover, and lower parts of New York, like Chautauqua County and Cattaraugus County. Those market participants don't really care as much about the topography of the land as long as it can be developed.
I'm just thinking, I can kind of picture, the market that you might be talking about, talking like horse drawn buggy and things like that. What are they getting loans for?
So it is like the horse drawn Amish community. These properties typically sell within the family or generation to generation. However, they obtain them with a private financing. So it could be like a neighbor in the community could finance it to get the funds to the seller immediately. So later on, they'll refinance the loan to their local lender or a lender that could be nationwide, depending on their capability.
So even though it may look like we're in a time capsule going back 100 years, there's still business as usual as the way that they operate with their banking.
They do work with very specific lenders in our local market that specialize in those properties. So they don't only look at
Okay.
the improvements; they look at the land as a piece of the property that is financed. Then, so you could have 100 acres. The site value is also what they're looking at too. What's there?
So, Beau, talk to me a little bit about when you're at these properties. What are some of the different construction little differences that you see? Like I've heard of like nailless. Is that a thing? No nails?
So I haven't come across that, but you do get
Okay.
the unfinished flooring, which is finished in there. So you get plywood, OSB down. The drywall could be hung, but not finished, not mudded, sanded, all that stuff.
Specifically on the floor?
For the flooring, yeah, the OSB or the plywood would be on the flooring, and then for the walls, you get just drywall hung, but not necessarily finished, not sanded, mudded, painted. Yeah.
What's the idea behind not putting carpet on top of that, or what's with the flooring? What is
I
that?
think that's just a market accepted thing in some of these communities that we do appraise in. They're not so
Okay.
worried about the finish, more of the functional utility. Can we fit 5, 6 bedrooms in this house with 2,400 square feet? And how can we do it
Yep.
and be financially feasible?
So now I'm looking
Okay.
at Warren, PA. It has a population of 9,125. Now you said 5 to 6 bedrooms in a house. I guess these are densely populated homes.
So those properties would be in the Amish community, and they have multiple children. So you're looking, yeah, they're building 5 or 6 bedrooms in those houses just to put a roof over their heads.
Yes. So Warren, I think it's like a mini city that he's working
Yeah.
in. Like we have these big cities with, things on top of each other, but you're
Yeah.
working on more neighborhoods and homes that have to accommodate these larger residents.
In Warren, when you do an appraisal, it's technically considered an urban market for our standards because we do have more rural areas outside to meet the form. It would technically fit under that urban market, which becomes the issue when you do these appraisals for lenders across the country. They might say, well, you have a comp 2 miles away. How's it an urban market? Technically, it's still an urban market because it's the small city with the rural community around it.
But do you primarily work in Warren, PA, or do you work in other areas? Are you primarily doing just residential, these larger homes, or what kind of other type of appraisals do you do?
So I do strictly residential, and I have about a 45-minute to an hour radius outside of Warren. So we go to, I think we cover about seven counties in our area.
So now you have these small little, these urban communities in a rural setting. So I guess it must be difficult for banks that are lending outside of the market to come in and say, wait a second, you're up north in Pennsylvania. How do you define this as an urban neighborhood? Does that become difficult when you're having an appraisal reviewer coming back to give you their opinion on or some questions on your appraisal?
So we get the clients will come back and ask questions about suburban, urban, rural. Well, how do we come up with comps that are 5 miles away, 2 miles away, and with the added detail, it seems to eliminate those extra revision requests or the extra questions or concerns from a reviewer. we were able to add enough detail in our reports that we don't get those questions often.
Beau, do you do FHA appraisals?
So I do FHA and USDA.
Okay, so walk me through what a inspection looks like on an FHA appraisal in a property like we're talking about, where there's like no electricity or things like that. How does that work?
So to be honest, there hasn't been any FHA loans on those properties.
Okay, that's what I figured might be the answer, but I just
Mhm.
wanted to make
Yep.
sure, because if you were telling me that
Yeah, it'd
that
be quite.
they're accepting that, I'd be like, whoa,
Yeah, it'd be quite
that's
the
different.
change. Yeah.
So how does that work? No electricity? Are there electricity to the street, but they don't provide it to the buildings? And do they still run things on gas or oil?
So typically, the electric is available at the street. However, what they do typically is they'll have wood burning. Wood burning would be the primary heat source, a wood stove in the basement, and typically one in the kitchen for cooking, and additional heat source that will run up to the second floor. Additionally, they'll use solar to charge batteries, like a drill battery, and that will be used to function their bathroom lighting and stuff like that.
They're more advanced than we are with the
Yeah.
solar. Do they get government grants for their solar power systems? And do they build them on their roof? Do they have them outside? How does this work in your neighborhood?
So typically they just have a couple solar panels, enough to generate enough power for the charging of the batteries. So there's no significant like grants or anything like that. And they don't lease their solar panels or anything like that. They just buy probably the basic ones from Home Depot or Lowe's, just enough to get a charge to power what they need.
So I was wondering about the appraisal industry in the market. How many appraisers are there that actually focus on these type of markets? Because if you're the one and done, then you have a huge basket of work to do.
So in our market, there's probably 5 to 10 appraisers that are in our market,
Hmm.
which isn't too bad. However, we do a lot of the work in Warren County between me and my partner at our office. We handle most of that stuff because all the other appraisers have gotten old. What do they call it at the institute? It's probably going to be kind
Retired.
of.
So a lot of the appraisers in your community have retired, which is leaving a lot of openings for people coming in. What are the, if you don't mind sharing, what are the fees that the AMCs are charging for appraisal work? Because you have to have some specialties, right? You need to specialize in this market to do work there, considering it's so diverse from other urban or rural communities.
So for the more complex assignments, I think the typical fee would probably be closer to about $700 for a rural Amish property or something like that. And it's just the average 2-story house would probably be somewhere around like the 450 mark.
So, Warren, how does that compare to residential appraising out in Colorado?
Do you happen to know what the public fee for a VA appraisal is in your market?
I think it's 750.
Our VA fee here in my market is 800.
Oh, wow.
So
So
yeah,
it's very similar in a
yeah.
extremely urban market compared to somewhere that's less populated.
Complex wise, probably a bit steeper than Beau's market here in Denver, but it all just depends. A lot of times complex just means they want it quicker.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with the property itself.
I think the fees are obviously negotiable too. So if we go out and inspect it, we see 3 dwellings on the property. I have it noted here. You'll see on the assessment card that there's 1 house, and then you'll go out there and there might be 2 dwellings, 7 outbuildings, and then we can go back and renegotiate with the client about a higher fee or longer turn time in order to find comps or what they're looking for in the comp wise. In the refinance market, there's a little more leniency, a little more cushion to on these non-conventional properties. There's a little more cushion on them.
What would you say when dealing with specific properties in your market that are so unique? What are some of the maybe mistakes that you've seen appraisers make over and over when dealing with types of properties that you see every day?
I think the big thing there is either overestimating or underestimating the marketability of the property. So every property, no matter how unique it is, there is a buyer and or a market participant that would want it. So I think not taking all the factors into account when you're going through an appraisal process, like the sales comparison or even the cost approach. If you're not breaking it down and taking all the factors in, you could underestimate the value or you could overestimate it, and it could be misleading to the lender or the client.
So can I go back to like jobs in your area? Is there a lot of construction demand I guess there's not a lot of construction demand for commercial development, but are people developing new homes?
Since COVID, we've seen an influx of new construction because prices have gone up. So you get to that point where it almost costs as much to build new as to buy a house and put $100,000 in to renovate it to make it how you want it. So we have seen an increase in that. However, there's not as much land available, so it's difficult to find the land to develop. There's a decent amount of renovation contractors, but we've also seen a lot of people do it themselves. So when you get into the Amish community, everything is do it yourself. So they'll renovate those houses. They'll build them. They'll build a house in 2 weeks.
Wait, how do you do that?
Whoa.
Slow down.
Yeah.
A house in 2 weeks.
They'll have those things built up because they'll get a crew of about 30 people, and that'll be their focus. Is you do that. So then, when you're working through an appraisal, you might think cost per square foot to build. How much is it? But when you have all your cousins, relatives, neighbors, the overhead is much lower.
How about zoning? How does that affect development? It's like, wow, you just blew my mind right now.
A lot of our area where these properties are being built, there's no zoning. So we have a lot of no zoning areas within Warren County.
So 2 houses and three barns. So it's like a commune. So you have family, you have like a parent, and their son comes in with a spouse and their children, and then as the family keeps growing, they keep building. Is that what happens?
You get it like a generational path there. So the mom and pop might build the first house. As they get older, they might want a 1-story house, so they'll sell it to one of the kids or transfer it to the kids, and then they'll refinance it to build the other house. And it's kind of a continuation of that. And then the barns, they'll have a barn for like their horse and buggy. They'll have a barn for the horses, the cows, the pigs, any animals, and then they'll also have like
The engine.
yeah, and then they'll also have a lot of them have like sawmills and stuff like that, so they can build their own things.
So you said that there's not a lot of land available. It's not that there's not a lot of vacant land. It's just that the land is owned by, private owners, right?
In our area, we have a lot of oil companies that own a lot of our land too. So you get between like the oil companies and the farmland, a lot of that land is not available. It's not necessarily occupied or developed, but it's just not available to the public.
Beau, thank you for joining us today. Super interesting stuff about your market. I think Tonia and I can both say our minds are blown a bit. Tonia, if somebody had an idea that they wanted to bring to us, how would they do that?
Well, they would definitely email us at facevalue@appraisalinstitute.org. But I'm just, interested about Beau's story and where he's at. And there's appraising everywhere in every community, every neighborhood, every corner of the country. And we'd love to hear more stories about your neighborhood, your communities, or anything interesting that you have to share with us. So please email us.